Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry, and with me as always is...
It's the next best thing to actually being a mother. Any of Edward's truth.
And I'll for those of you listening, just the visual representation for what just happened. Edward is dressed exactly like the villain in the movie that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Which is the hand that rocks the cradle, released January 10th, 1992. You're cosplaying Rebecca De Mornay as Mrs. Motts.
It just happened. It was just baconing. Yeah. Baconing. It was baconing out to me.
Well, you got the sweater tied over your shoulders, which I always associate.
It's a very preppy look. Yeah.
Yeah, very preppy. I always associate it with Carlton from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh, okay. See, I never watched Fresh Prince. Yeah. So for me, I always think about like the villains in the teen movies of the 80s. They dressed like this too.
Yeah.
It's by tying it around their shoulders for some reason. I never understood it. But I thought it looked cool when I was a kid. So in grade school, I actually did it a few times. I'd take a nice sweater. That was another thing they do. They take really nice sweaters and drape them over. And sometimes they wouldn't tie it. Sometimes they'd tuck one sleeve into the other. So it just looked like a loop. It was so... We were so weird. What were we thinking?
That's how you knew that someone was a villain in film and in life. And
I was in my grade school villain era. That's what I was.
And I mean, it's fitting because this movie is kind of like... It's a similar thing to like Single White Female and Raising Cain, where it's not quite the 80s and it's not quite the 90s, but it's sort of like the 80s passing the baton to the 90s, which has kind of like 100%. Become my favorite like genre of thriller.
I get that.
Yeah, like those
100%.
Those late 80s, early 90s movies, because this is 1992, and it just like it's kind of like caught in between the decades, and it just like it has the best of both worlds, I think, and this one I really like. I don't know if I like it as much as the other two that I mentioned, Single White Female and Raising Cain, but no, this is a really fun one, and I actually own this on DVD, so I haven't upgraded it. I might have to. I mean, we'll see if there's like a special edition that comes out, because I've had that for a while. But this is a movie that I always saw on TV. Like it was always like edited probably on like the TBS Superstation or something like that.
Sure.
Where they would have like the usual suspects playing as well, and it would always be like the "Give me the keys, you fuzzy sock sucker."
Right. Yeah. Shawshank Redemption is another one that ran the gamut, like on it's like easy access cable television kind of stuff. And which is that was always playing.
Interesting, because this movie doesn't really have all that much that is like provocative that would need to be kind of like cut down, like if it wasn't, and I say this because like the vibe I get from this, like it kind of feels like a TV movie. Do you get that? Yeah. But like a good one, like a good quality TV movie.
I think I mentioned when we were doing our last Patreon discussion between the two Black Christmas remakes, the 2019 one, I think, I alleged that it feels like a bad Lifetime TV movie of this era, of like the early 90s into like mid 90s. Yeah. And this one actually feels like probably the model for everything that the Lifetime TV movies were aspiring to be. Because I agree with you, I don't think it's stellar filmmaking and it should be held up, by the AFI for all to applaud and praise. But I do think it is a damn good time. It is a rollicking thriller with maybe not as much eroticism as, say, like a Basic Instinct or a Single White Female or a Fatal Attraction or anything like that, because those are all about, erotica. But with this one, it's definitely there. Like, there's definitely like a sexual layer to it.
It's got a very, it has a very like sanitized version of things like that. Because yeah, there is sort of like a quality to it, and you kind of see that with Rebecca De Mornay, and I guess like her attempt at a seduction that never really goes anywhere, but there's a hint of it. So this feels to me more like, like what you would see on like a Desperate Housewives or something, like a villain on a series like that, which is like it's a lot of fun, and I think that there's like a lot of dimension to the character as well. Like I think this is a movie that could have been, pretty like straightforward, just like evil nanny or whatever, but like there's a lot more to it. And actually, I'm just looking at the info on the budget and box office. So this was, and I don't think this is adjusted for inflation. This might just be 1992 times, but $11.9 million was the budget. This grossed $140 million. So this was like a huge success. And these are movies that just don't get made anymore. And like, because this is not that this is even mid-range. I mean, I guess if you adjust that for inflation, it would be more mid-range by today's standards. But that's what's so great about the early 90s of just like the things that they were making there. Because it's just like studios were taking chances on things like these. And this is not like a high-risk project by any means, but
no, it's
like it paid off clearly, making like well over 10 times its budget. And I don't know if you know this, and this is kind of like partially the reason that I thought to cover this for the Cherry Picker, is that they're remaking this.
Oh dear, I don't know how I feel about
I'm
that.
actually interested, and we can talk more about that in a bit, but they're remaking it, and it's going to feature Maika Monroe as the villain, as Peyton. I don't know if it'll be like the same names. And then Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who I'm assuming is playing the Claire character.
Right.
Which is just, it's good casting. So I'm interested in that. But I would be interested to see, a take of it that was maybe more, like delved more into the character of like the Rebecca De Mornay character. Because what we do kind of get a lot of that, like especially at the beginning, but I feel like as it goes on, it sort of like wanes like more towards the Claire side of things. And if I have an issue with this movie, it's probably the final act, because it feels like very rushed and kind of like, all right, I guess we just got to wrap things up. And then in doing so, I felt that Peyton kind of lost all of her, just like all of the characterization that made her stand out, that she wasn't just like a mustache twirling villain. Because at the end, it just seemed like, okay, now we're just kind of like going into hyperdrive of like, we gotta wrap things up, so we gotta like bring out the crazy.
I feel like movies of this era, that if there is, I can't even call it a flaw. I feel like it's more just kind of like a factor. They tended to do that. Like any attempt to try and make the heavy, who was usually a woman, like in the case of Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, Single White Female, Hand That Rocks the Cradle, it's always a woman. And it's always like a really stellar actress giving an incredible performance. That's nuanced and varied and that researched and everything like that, and is as alive and visceral and spontaneous as you could hope it could be. But at the end, ultimately, because these are still movies coming out of the Hollywood machine, these aren't like indie movies. I think because of that reason, the women have to pay some kind of ultimate price.
And that's, I agree to a point, but if you watch Single White Female, which we covered, the character of Hetty, like there's a lot more to her, like at the end, like just like her kind of breakdown and descent into madness. Like it feels more like it's within the trajectory of where she was heading. It wasn't just like a sudden like, okay, here we go, we're in the final act. Like I felt that there was like, you could kind of see the walls caving in on her. Like it almost felt like, like if this was a Scream movie where you have the Ghostface reveal themselves and there's the villain monologue and everything happens at the end. And I feel with this one in particular, it just sort of, there's a great moment, and we should like get into the housekeeping before we really dive in. But there's a great moment that I'll just mention where Claire realized, like, I guess she's just discovered the truth about who Peyton is, and she comes home and she just walks over to her and punches her right in the face, which is awesome. And then after that, it just feels like she's like, okay, I'm leaving. And then we don't really see, we kind of like leave that character for a bit as the family's just like, okay, we're gonna go to a hotel or whatever. And then she just sort of appears again inside the house. Like, I think that if you're comparing that to like a Fatal Attraction or a Single White Female, like the story is more so still on the villain, and we're kind of just seeing like what process they're going through to get to that point where they're essentially taking themselves to like the furthest limit of where they can with their villainous scheme. And I don't think that we got that in the final act of this movie.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's all I'll say before we housekeep.
Yeah, well, let's housekeep. So, hey, welcome to The Cherry Picker if you're new. This is a podcast that we do 4 times a month, 3 times regularly, and we also have a bonus episode called The Cherry Picker After Dark, which is a Patreon exclusive. So if you are new to The Cherry Picker, or if you've been listening for a while, you can head over to my Patreon, www.patreon.com/ZackCherry. That's ZackCherry. And if you're supporting at any tier, you'll get early access to all of our episodes. And if you're supporting at the Freddy Krueger tier, $5 a month, you'll get access to the bonus episodes. And we have a back catalog of about 30 of those right now. So if you enjoy listening to us and you want to hear even more, there are hours and hours and hours of content, of episodes of just Eddie and I just tearing each other apart over our opinions.
That's the nature
things.
Of the podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want more of that, head over there. But I do want to thank a few of the top tier supporters. So to the Michael Myers tier, thank you to Kyle Beard, Maxime Rivest, Ali Hamouche, Shane Allingham, Tim McKay, Stephanie Starbright, Horror Slut 95, Bruce the Genetic Jackhammer Rando, Josh Carr, Michael Boswell, and then the Ghost Faces, Eric Champney, Sam Levy, Daniel Saturn, Baby Ghoul, Garrison Nichols, and Craig Lynn. So thank you very much to all of yous. And also thank you to our editor of the podcast, Jason Voorhees Gallotello.
What?
I forgot to shout him out last week.
Aww.
I said, well, yesterday when we recorded the previous episode. But
full disclosure.
Yeah. Here we are. So premise us.
All right, my premise that I put together. I'm just trying to buy time. Here we go. No particular voice, right?
Just do what you want. Unless you want to do like the Rebecca De Mornay voice.
She doesn't really have a distinctive way of speaking that I can like. Because I saw the movie for the first time yesterday, guys. So yeah. I don't have her down yet, but I'll just do the. Mm-hmm. This was that era where people would talk like this anyway in their trailers, so I'll do that. Okay. When Inspector Mother Claire Bartell accuses Dr. Victor Mott of crossing a boundary as her gynecologist, and 4 other women also corroborate his improprieties against them, Dr. Mott evades all consequences by committing suicide, leaving his own wife to suffer a miscarriage alone and lose her home to civil judgments against the Mott estate. Now, under the alias Peyton Flanders, Dr. Mott's widow manipulates her way into the Bartell household as a friendly nanny, seeking to exact bloody revenge under a benevolent guise of the hand that rocks the cradle.
You know what's funny is that the trailer itself, because it's literally the only special feature on this disc. It's one of those things, like, it starts off where it's very, innocent, very innocuous. It's just like the Bartell family had everything until
This was that era, 100%. So, talking about your release, do you want me to go over
is this out of print? Like, what's the situation?
Okay, this is the thing. As far as physical media, it boasts a pretty pedestrian Buena Vista Blu-ray release where the only special feature on that is also the trailer. And it has pretty, it's okay. It doesn't look like it's exemplary as far as the video or the audio either. So we're waiting. Arrow, Screen Factory, somebody release it.
I noticed
please.
as well, like everything, in this was like very washed out, because like the trailer, it looked like a little bit more vibrant. Like and this is like old, like whatever, like 720
standard def.
So, but like still, it's like, it's like the old DVDs or Blu-rays of the Scream movies, where just like the color was just completely off and everything. So there's not a good way. I mean, unless it's on streaming somewhere where it's been corrected. But
it's not on any subscription platform yet, but it is available for individual rental on YouTube Prime or Apple TV Plus, which is where I found it. And it actually looked really, really good off of that. So something was done to it since the 90s, thank God.
Since this came out.
We need more.
Which I don't even...
Yeah, we deserve more, though. Especially with this movie.
Yeah, like
having never seen
I'd love to see like some sort of like Arrow or like Shout Factory release and just like have Rebecca De Mornay and what's her name? Well, not
Annabella Sciorra.
Yes, I think it's pronounced Shora.
Shora.
Yeah.
Oh,
because I always looked at that as like Sciorra, but then I was looking up trivia about the movie and her, and it was just like pronounced Shora, and I'm like, okay.
Oh.
I don't think Julianne Moore would be available. This seems kind of like beyond her scope of what she does these days. But I would love to hear her opinions about this, because this is one of her earliest roles as well.
Right up there with Benny and June, like when she looks really, really young, like when she was, I think she was fresh off of the soap opera circuit.
Julianne Moore, like, she sort of has this like quality that I also think like Nicole Kidman has, where just like she's always looked old, and I don't mean old, I just mean like mature, like, because in this movie
came into her look early on.
Like in this movie, like I don't know how old she would be here, but she looks like she's probably like mid-30s or somewhere there, but she even like there's sort of like her style throughout this changes quite a bit. Like there's, when we first see her, she's got her hair tied back, and then she's kind of got it's like puffier at one point, but then when they're having the surprise party, she's got like this flippy Brie Vandekamp do,
which she wore. And also oh God, Julianne Moore in this movie. I absolutely, I knew, you told me before I watched that she was going to be in it, which I did not know. So I was like, oh, there she is. And the second she was on screen, it was like seeing an old friend. And luckily she's playing an old friend. I was like, oh, there she is. And she warranted every bit of the joy that I got when I saw her on screen, because she was the smartest person on screen for so much of the movie. Thank God.
Well, the smartest that wasn't like diabolical. Because I think that there's an argument to be made that that Peyton is the smartest person in the movie, with all the scheming and the manipulation.
I mean, manipulation is key to this character. Okay, can we just get into it then? Because this is the thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know. It opened and we're following Annabella Sciorra, and I'm like, or Claire as her character and everything, and everything about it. Even I love the opening credits, because that was another thing that linked this in my mind with like Fatal Attraction and Basic Instinct and whatever. Because like one thing that was really prevalent at this time that I think we've spoken about before is like the white loft, the Adrian Lyne white loft. And this was a house where all the walls and the stairs and the banister and the this and the molding and the that, everything was white. So it just kind of like, I was like, oh my God, we're in a thriller in the early 90s. Thank you. Welcome to me. And and then everything. There was something about like I recognized early on. I was like, it sounds like the score is emulating the HMS Pinafore or Pirates of Penzance, like a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan going on, and then it did.
Well, what I was
because
getting,
that's what the family plays.
There's two things that I was getting, and I completely forgot the second one, but I was getting Silence of the Lambs. Like there were moments where it just like full on sounded like Silence of the Lambs. Oh my gosh. The other one is going to come to me, and I think it was a movie that we had covered before, but the score is composed by Graham Revell. Yes. Is that how you say it? Who's also did Child's Play? Was it the original or the second one?
I believe so. Yeah, he's usually the one who's credited.
Yeah.
Whenever I put it in my Instagram stories. So yeah, Graham Revell, he's wonderful. But again, like I love that. I recognized and I thought like, oh, am I hearing Gilbert and Sullivan? And then I saw all these posters in the house, and they were repeatedly playing it throughout like the entire thing. Like I'm hearing, "Oh, little buttercup," or whatever the fuck they're playing. And it's just like, okay, someone made a decision that this family is obsessed with Gilbert and Sullivan. Interesting. Okay, that's a choice, I guess, because those are like kitschy, old school, sweet, safe little melodramas that are funny. And I wonder if it was trying to either provide everything that we were going to experience once Peyton hits the screen, like with the family and everything like that all of that is going to be torn asunder, or if we're not supposed to take it too seriously, and if it's going to have us kind of enjoying it the same way we would an evening of Gilbert and Sullivan. I didn't know, but and I still don't know. I think a little bit of both. But I love the safety that they kind of like created within the family, because then Ernie Hudson, comes on the screen, and I was not expecting him, and he's playing a gentleman with some kind of like mental disability, and he's working through the Better Day Society, and. Which they keep, a fence.
Which the husband keeps calling the Better Way Society, and they're just
Better Day. Little Emma, who actually I was also getting like a weird mix of kind of like Drew Barrymore, and what is her name? The little girl, is it Mara Wilson?
At first I thought it was Mara Wilson, but no, this actress and she's still working, I believe.
Oh wow.
But let's just see if we can recognize her from something else. But the actress's name is Madeline Zima.
Okay, sounds familiar.
Yeah, and she was on the Twin Peaks revival. She's been in You, like the Penn Badgley show. Bombshell with Charlize Theron, Nicole Kidman, who we mentioned, and Margot Robbie, which I still haven't seen, and I want to. John Lithgow is also in that.
Oh wow.
So yeah, she's appearing in like a lot of things still, but I don't, who knows what she looks like now. But definitely, I was getting a Mara Wilson.
With that lisp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm watching Ernie Hudson. I'm just kind of like, okay, we couldn't do this today because he's, a man playing, someone with a mental handicap, but he does not have one. I'm just kind of like, I think they just
why can't we do that today? Like, let's be honest here. That's a little ridiculous.
It's been done to death. But anyway,
but it sounded like you were saying that like you can't have someone who's not mentally handicapped play someone who's mentally handicapped.
It's not that you can't, but I think that it was much more of a trope around the time of the 80s and the 90s than it is now. Like
it's acting.
I don't see that.
It's performance.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying there would be people speaking up.
Well, and I mean they need to calm down.
Well, I'm not going to say that, but what I will say is that Ernie Hudson, I thought, did a really, really great job.
Absolutely,
because he's Ernie Hudson, but also because like he just won my heart in terms of his investment with the family and everything about the way he was written too. It was like borderline tropey, but the same. But I don't know, everything about like the course that his character took, and also what he was supposed to mean and what it was supposed to mean to me when he was kind of wretched from the family. All of it worked perfectly. So I I just walk away applauding, like what ended up happening with those decisions to have him play the role and to have the role be portrayed in this particular way, because he was sympathetic the entire time. I never felt like, and I think it helped having Rebecca De Mornay's character Peyton just eviscerate him verbally, because it made me hate her so much more than I already did, and made me think, because everything that you said about like this character and the dimension that they grant her early on, I feel is pretty thorough throughout. Maybe towards the end they do kind of like go a little bit, cardboard cutout for the sake of expedition, but for the course of it, like, I love the fact that I feel like I can form opinions about this woman, whoever Peyton was before she assumed, we're presuming the alias, and that Peyton is not her real first name. And that I love that I get glimpses of her when I feel like she's kind of completely dropping her guys because it's safe to, like when she talks about her husband being murdered. And I'm watching her and I'm going like, you're not even lying right now, because from your vantage point, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
This woman murdered your husband when all she did in reality was speak out against a sexual act of aggression, that was perpetuated against her, and she sought justice. Yeah. But she doesn't see it that way, and I thought that was amazing.
So Peyton is a zodiac sign Cancer. We've decided. But
have we? Yeah. Okay.
Which I always think is just like water sign villains are always just the most interesting and complex, I think, anyway. But this is kind of like what I would want to see in a remake, that I more so from the perspective of that character at the beginning. Like, I would like to see what was their life before all of that. Like, I want to see who she was in this reality where she was like this loving wife who was pregnant and expecting a child, and she had no idea what his transgressions were, anything like as far as she was concerned, like he was the perfect husband and all of this, and then her world is ripped away from her, and this is what she thinks. It's like, this woman murdered my husband and now I'm going to exact revenge. Like, I want to see that, like, just a normal person get to that level, like just have their life upturned so much that they can become this character. And I think that we were getting like little glimpses of that, because the first time we're introduced to Peyton is when she's sitting in like the room with all the lawyers, and they're just like, you know what, you're not going to have anything, like you can stay in the house until the baby is born, yada yada yada. Great. Okay, Rebecca De Mornay's physical acting, like the icy stares that she gives, and there's a few moments, but the first one is just when she looks at the lawyer, just like, are you fucking with me? Like, don't you dare! You shut your mouth. And then we get another one right away when she meets Ernie Hudson for the first time. Because it's like, because she's initially she's just very warm. She's like, "Hi, nice to meet you," and then he gets like, is it like a grass stain on her sleeve? Or?
No, it was green paint. It was actually a fleck of green paint from what he was working on the trim. Yeah,
and she just sort of had this.
She gets it on her cuff,
and then like she had to like pull herself back together.
What the fuck are you doing, fucker? Back off! And I'm like, okay. Yeah. This is not, and and it was so. That's the thing I love. Okay, Rebecca De Mornay. I knew going into this. I knew years ago. This was kind of like how she happened. Like, she had been working prior to this, but this was the thing that everybody knew who she was all of a sudden.
Well, wasn't she became in the Tom Cruise Risky Business, right? Which was she was 10 years.
And she was also, No, so people knew who she was, but this was like the thing that people associated her with, or at least in my particular era, like, because I remember the only other thing that was kind of on my radar that I knew about that I actually did see that happened pretty soon after this was in the TV movie Shining version with Steven Weber, and she played Wendy Torrance in that. Yeah. And we won't talk about that. But I remember I thought she was cool. I thought she didn't seem to have like any direction or any kind of like strong point of view that was given to her on a way to play the character. So she just did the best she could, and it was what it was. But from my memory, I haven't seen it in years, but I just remember thinking like I had a good image of her, and I remember seeing the more than even the commercials or the billboards for this movie. I remember seeing the newspaper ads when you used to have like the calendar section of the newspaper, and there would be like all the ads for the movies and where it's playing and everything like that, and that's how you would know where you were going to go to see what you wanted to see. And every week for I forget how many weeks, there was that photo of her like holding the baby, I think in profile, and the parents were like kind of holding each other behind her, and that was the logo. I remember just seeing and going like, oh, that looks interesting, I'll see it at some point. And
here we are. Yeah.
Yes.
30 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I got there. Hey, it takes what it takes.
Yeah.
But she, anyway, the performance and the way she flinched in particular from Solomon, Ernie Hudson's character, immediately told me something I needed to see. That's one thing. I don't know if I entirely agree. Like, if you're going to remake it, do it differently. So maybe that's a direction they can go. I'm not as emphatically pro that as you are, though, because one of the things I actually kind of cherished about the way it was handled in this movie was I loved the air of mystery around her. The fact that I didn't know right off the bat how bad she was. And that with each kind of like developmental scene, I knew when she was putting on the fakery, but I also loved being kind of shocked at like, oh, okay, didn't know you could do that. Like, or didn't know like how petty and socially like horrible you can be as a person.
Well, if you're like going that direction, what I would have preferred to see, and not saying that I, because I like this movie how it is, but like what you're saying, I would have gone the opposite direction where we don't actually know that that's the widow. I think that it would just be a situation where the family goes through this like horrible experience with her gynecologist, and the guy commits suicide and whatever, and they get the settlement, but then they go about their life, and they're like, we're seeing it more from Claire's perspective, and she's like, oh, okay, I gotta like find myself again, and like I'm gonna build this greenhouse and yada yada yada. We need to get a nanny. Nanny comes in. We don't know any, like the nanny just seems like a sweet person, and as we go along, it's just like you're finding out there's weird things about her, and then we don't actually find out that the nanny is the wife. Like almost like this was like a Scream movie where it's just like, why is this? No, I'm not saying that that's what I would have wanted, but I'm just saying if that's the direction that they were gonna go with it, I would have there been, like, draw a line in the sand. You're either on one side or the other. Because here it's sort of like, I didn't get that. I knew that there wasn't really an air of mystery about what she was going to do. It was just maybe like how it was going to come about. But like, we knew what her intentions were. We knew why she was going there. So it
did we though? Because I felt like I didn't have a clear end game from her. I just knew she needed to go there because she needed a wrong to be righted. Yeah. I didn't know what that looked like. Like when she starts to go toward the baby with the pillow, because I also watched this with my mother because she had never seen it before either, and she saw the trailer and was like, I'll watch it with you, and it was fun. Because as she was like moving toward little Joe with the crib, with the pillow, we were like, oh, is this where it's gonna go? Because we were shocked already. We were gobsmacked. And then when she just kind of uses it to cover the baby monitor and then lift him and then feed him, and I'm asking my mother, can she do that 6 months after she's given birth? And my mom's like, I think so. And we were it was like a long conversation, this movie.
that happened relatively early on, just to show us like that there was more of a nurturing side to her. So I mean personally, and I've seen this movie before. I've had the luxury of having it, in my periphery for years and years and years. That I know the outcome, but it still always seemed like with the way the character is presented, like even watching it now, that this is a woman who like by the very nature of what you said, she feels that she's the victim here. She thinks that her husband has been murdered. So I can't see her going into this scenario and wanting to like murder a baby to kind of like, an eye for an eye. It seemed to me very clearly that it's just like she wants to steal this woman's family.
And see, that was not clear to me. But I liked the ambiguity of my experience because, again, also like, then we had a question mark. Once it was clear that she wanted to kind of like move in and take the place of the mother by like, basically imprinting on this infant by breastfeeding it so the baby reaches for her instead, and then creating this like, what did they call it? Secret society or whatever, secret club, when they would do their fingers crossed with Emma and everything like that.
Society.
Like, yeah. But secret club with Emma and by, like avenging her by like, going up and twisting
that was such a wonderful arm. I love that. That was so great.
Oh my God, it was amazing, but it was terrifying because I was like, okay, this is this is white privilege on parade. Like poor Ernie Hudson is just kind of like walking around the house trying to find a way in. Yeah. And they're going, and at the beginning of the movie, and then this woman is full on going into a school and walking onto the playground. There are nobody's watching the children. She twists this little boy's arm and nobody tells on her. And the little girl is even smiling and shit. And she's walking away in her little preppy sweater. With that swagger. That is another thing that I loved that Rebecca De Mornay brought. And she just had this strut where she kind of like swivel her hips and just kind of dart her elbows a little bit when she'd walk away from something. And it was peppy, but it was also, I don't know, it was eerily jaunty.
Well, I mean,
it was all...
but that's why like you can tell her motivations, because she's trying to ingratiate herself to this family and like this girl. Like they have this private relationship outside of, like whatever the pretenses of like who she's being to Mother Claire. So yeah, I mean, like there's from the get-go there could have been like a lot of motivating factors for why she was doing this, like the fact that like all of the money has been lost because it's now going to pay towards the lawsuits of all the women who have come forward, essentially like leaving her, like just stripping her life away. But the fact that she's coming to this house and it's not about getting financially what she feels entitled to, but like really just trying to kind of regain the connection to a familial connection that was taken away from her. That's where the character always made sense to me.
But that's why it always made me, because as we started to learn more about her, I agree, like things started to become sharper, but I always had another question about her until the end. Because like once I knew she wanted to corral these children, I was like, okay, so does she want to get rid of both the parents, or does she want to like take the place, usurp the mother, and like move in and get a new husband as well because she lost her husband? Or is it just about being the mother? Like I didn't know, because we never really, okay. Because we don't get much exposure to like what her actual marital life with him was like. There's this wonderful question mark over your head about like, well, was she blind to everything that he was doing, or wasn't she? And because that was another thing, I feel like there was a nub of like a clue, like when she was sitting there again, when she was disclosing something, and I felt like, you're not lying, you're telling the truth here. When she was telling early on, she's sitting there with Claire, and Peyton's talking about her husband and about how he was murdered, but she says he was the only person who ever really understood me. And I was like, as the movie progressed, the more and more I thought about it, the more I thought like, I think he was. I think you too, in your own way, were both master manipulators, because it came to me when like she was when Claire has the file that she worked all night with her husband that had the figures in them and everything, and she leaves for a second, and then Peyton grabs the file and tears up the envelope and goes ballistic in that little public restroom.
It would have been hilarious if like Annabella Shora like came in and just like, everything okay? And they're just like, good. Because she's making a big
Gina
noise.
Gershon is fingering me.
Now we need the Jennifer Tilly version.
Of course, we always have to do that, but one of the Jennifers at least. Yeah. But no, after she goes ballistic in the bathroom and tears it all up and flushes much of it down the toilet, I assume, and then composes herself and goes back, she sits there and watches, like leering, like with the children in the back of the car, while she's watching Claire realize she doesn't have it anymore, kind of lose her shit, pace around, do her little wheezing thing because she's asthmatic many times in this movie. And I just was watching her watch. It was very Hitchcockian too, like watching the aggressor watch the person that they're like playing cat and mouse with. And I was watching her watch her, and I was just like, okay, you get off on making people suffer too, just like your husband did. I don't know the extent to which she knew what he was doing at work or anything like that, but I have a feeling one thing they both kind of understood about each other, if I have any kind of like headcanon thing about them, I think they were terrible people, and I think they both kind of proliferated that, like they nurtured it and just allowed it to exist between the two of them. Like, here we are, these picture perfect people. They were, oh my god, we just talked about fucking opera with the opera Macbeth. They were Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. That's who they were. They were just incredibly flawed people who wanted to just build this palace out of on the shoulders of other people's suffering, and they were going to do anything they had to get it. And then when it was finally, because also that's another thing, the clue for me that she also was not like just kind of like a regular person who got screwed over and now has been driven to this, is that like good people in times of great what's the word I'm looking for, distress or loss or grief, oftentimes the most pronounced qualities about them are the ones that come into play. So if you're a really, really good person who has the worst day on earth, you're probably going to have, you'll have your day, but then you're going to have a perspective on it. You're going to go on being like a really good, like strong person. There are studies on this. And then horrible people who achieve everything become just horrible people who have everything. And they just get off on being horrible people in power. So I feel like for me with her, the fact that she saw herself, she'd rather see herself as a victim than see herself as this oppressor to this family who's invading their trust and corrupting the relationship, the sanctity of marriage, of their relationships with their friends, their relationships with their children, which we'll get to. But I like the fact that she goes in that direction. She could have just walked away. She could have said, you know what? He was a shithead, and god damn it that this all happened to me. It's wrong. It shouldn't have. But you know who doesn't deserve to suffer? The woman who my husband violated. Like, I think it takes a particular type of wiring to do what she did already as it stands, like from the beginning of the movie. Like, I think she was
I think that,
kind of already wired for this.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that there's still a little bit more nuance to that. Like, you could be wired in a certain way, but, I think that stories that are so interesting to me are people, like just good people who are pushed to a point of desperation where, I agree that like there's something that's kind of like already inherent to who they are that sort of like exists there, that's then sort of put under a microscope or just like bubbles up to the surface when push comes to shove. And she's put into this position, but I think it's far more interesting to imagine her as this could be part of her psychology, but I don't see her as like I don't see them as like this evil power couple who's just like, okay, so you have this unethical practice, and I'm just like the wife who's sitting at home like collecting the checks and going out shopping or whatever. Like, that just it makes her less interesting to think of her as just like already, whether she knew it or not, but just being this like terrible person. I'd rather a scenario, and I hope that if this is the remake that they do and they delve more into her backstory or just the time before that, that we see that this is a woman who's just become fractured and broken over time, and just like the psychological elements to her that are less savory do kind of come into play once she is put into the position where it is, because I think that for her to like be just like this horrible person and then and come in and say like, I'm the victim here, like that's not as interesting as her like actually having lived a life where she was a good person, and then like, because that's the thing, like villains who don't know that they're villains are the best villains. And if she's
I don't think she knows that she's a villain, or at least she would never admit it.
I think that when
justified in everything she's doing.
But when you say like they're quoting her line of just like, he's the only one that ever understood me, just saying that like, oh, that's a thing because he's evil and so is she, sort of like that makes.
That's what I drew. I'm just telling you what I got.
I understand, but I'm just like, when you said that, it made it seem like she knew that she was a piece of shit. So if I had to psychoanalyze that line, I think that it's sort of a way of just like that he didn't really know. It's not that her saying that he's the only person that ever really knew me. I think that that's sort of her covering up the fact that she didn't really know him. So that's sort of a defense mechanism that she's sort of like, it's almost like a reversal of that to just make it okay that like, or justified in her mind that her husband is just as much a victim as she is in this scenario.
I mean, I think both can be true. I think she can see them both as victims, but also see like, because this is the thing. I don't think she necessarily sees herself as Lady Macbeth. I think that's just who she is. But I do think that there is this sense like, it wasn't about so much I'm a shitty person and he was a shitty person, that's why we fit. It was more about he's wired a particular way and so am I. It tends to turn people off, but then we found each other and it made sense to each of us. So we made sense to each other in a way that like we didn't make sense to anybody else. That's more along the lines of like, from her vantage point, what I got. But from an outsider standpoint, it's like, I think you're both shitty people and always have been, and you just found someone who's at least as comfortable with being with someone who's as shitty as they are. Yeah, that's a label I'm putting on them, though. I'm not saying
that's
she's
fair, but I'm just trying to. I'm just for the nuggets that we've got throughout the movie, and there's quite a few. Like when she's in the park early on with the baby, and that woman just comes up and just like assumes that it's her child, and she's just like, "Oh, he has your eyes," and she's just like, "Yeah, do you really think so?" It's just this like genuine moment. Like she's just like, connected it to something. It wasn't like this psychology of her, like in this moment, like knowing that what she's doing, she's just actually just justifying everything that she's doing based on the fact that she knows that she's the person in the right here, and that it's just like these messages just coming in being like, no, I'm on this righteous path. What I'm doing is a good thing. Like that's just kind of what I picked up from that.
I love the subjectivity of this piece, because again, this is what makes it better than like just your standard Lifetime TV movie, because what I got from that particular exchange was, oh my gosh, someone recognizes the resemblance between and believes that this baby looks like me. So I could conceivably get away with like living a life with this as my baby. And they assume that that's my little girl. And I just say, oh, she looks like her father. Yeah, that works. It's almost like trying on an avatar for the life that's waiting for her.
I'm gonna use your justification that both can be true. Because certainly that might have been sort of like a bridge to where she ends up later on, but I genuinely think that like when she heard that was just like a moment where it was just like she just was genuinely touched by the sentiment of that, and just felt and like just went with it, and just like, yeah, This is my baby. This could be my baby, and I want it to be, and I deserve this baby. That's like above all else. Like she feels that this is what she deserves. She deserves this life, and this husband and all that. And I mean, you mentioned the line of like her saying that like someone murdered my husband, which I also think it's funny that Claire never really. Like this doesn't come up again. Like there's no, she doesn't think to talk to her husband, or like that. People are not communicating in this movie. But anyway, like the other instance of just sort of Peyton's delusion is when she's, making that play for seduction on, I don't even know the guy's name. I'm just the husband.
Michael.
Sure. Who apparently I'm cosplaying in this this podcast episode. Because he's just like, there's only one woman for me, and she takes that to mean her, which is just like, I don't know how that could be misinterpreted, but she walks away. It almost feels like very Arrested Development, like Lindsay Bluth, like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well,
I
for
know
me,
he
that's
means
also,
me.
I feel like that was a signal for me, especially in retrospect, like once we reached the end.
Yeah.
That was just kind of like a signal to me that like her grasp of reality is really starting to become untethered.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's already kind of like been building up this like, you know, this avatar fantasy about like, oh my God, this is what my life's going to be. All I have to do is get rid of this one and get rid of that one if he's not down. And if he's not down, I can still tell people that my husband was murdered and I'll still get more sympathy. Mm-hmm. And no one's ever going to suspect me because I wear sweaters and tie my hair back and I'm really pretty with blonde hair and blue eyes. If I never leave Connecticut, no one will ever suspect anything. But or wherever the fuck they are, I don't even know where they are. But the fact that
I think they're in San Francisco.
Is it?
It
okay,
looks.
I think it is.
I was getting
right.
San Francisco.
I don't remember. I feel like when they dip into the city, that there's definitely probably that, but I don't remember. Wherever they are, she because like that final moment, like when she's finally asked to leave by the family en masse, or at least by the parents, and she just kind of stands up and goes like, all right, I'll just go upstairs and get my baby. And they're like, excuse me? It's just like, I mean my things. And I'm like, yeah, see, she's losing. The woman is no longer living on yours and my frequency. Yeah. She is existing somewhere way up here where she's the good guy and where she's, you know, and where that she's rightfully like kind of like entitled, not only entitled to all of this, but has kind of like already declared ownership. And that's the way it is. These things are hers. So now it's just time to take them and leave. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, you bats, woman, you damn bats.
Seattle.
Seattle, okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It could have been any of the ones that we mentioned, honestly, but the fact that one of the things that actually I was kind of like, I wonder if this went over with audiences differently in 1992, or if we're supposed to feel the same way I did when I saw it, which is when she's got Emma and they're sitting in, I think they're in her bed together and they're watching horror movies together. Yeah. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. Like, and I feel like, I wonder if some people would watch that scene and go kind of like, oh, that's atrocious. How dare she show that little girl horror movies?
Jamie Lee Curtis wouldn't like that.
Exactly. Jamie Lee Curtis would hate that. But me, like, that was my childhood. My actual parents let me stay up, you know, past my bedtime when I wasn't going to school and stuff like that, and watch like the old, and these were old black and white movies too. That was another thing. It'd be one thing if she were like, if she put on The Thing or put on any, I did watch The Thing as a boy, but even that I could see somebody taking an issue with or something. If they took an issue with me, I'd say I'm fine. But I wanted to watch it and I watched it all the time as a kid. But if she was showing, or Evil Dead, or, you know, just something a little bit more less family friendly.
To speak to the parents themselves and how kind of like I mean, stupid they are, for lack of a better term, because it's just they never take the opportunity to listen to their daughter or speak to the daughter, because if they had, they might have like got a little bit more insight into things, because like they're obviously under the impression that I forget the Ernie Hudson character's name.
Solomon
has molested her. And she's just like, because they're like, hey, Solomon's been like allowed back into like work releases, so if you see him around, like, just, you know, let us know. And she's like, why would I have a problem with Solomon? Like, what is like she's full on stating it. And I think that like after a certain point in the movie, Claire's intuition kicks in, because she says, like, you know, it's weird that like all this stuff started to happen when Peyton arrived. And that's kind of the turning point for her. And it was a little strange because it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I wish that maybe that had been, like, there would have been something to, and maybe it was her saying that, like, my husband was murdered, and then there being, like, no further research into that, and it was just sort of something that, like, lingered with Claire, and she just sort of, like, was put off by it. But there really was, like, no hint or suggestion other than, like, Marlene just being like, don't, like, that's pretty ballsy, like having this like hot nanny come in, like, but there really was nothing to kind of segue.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot to say on this topic. But first off, like, that's one thing. I crave less revision. I mean, again, if you're going to do it again, do it different. So I wouldn't be upset if they give the Peyton character a different angle or more dimension or whatever, however you would put it. But for me, I think the thing I'd like to see refined the most is the parents, because I feel like they're the ones. I like this script a lot, but I do feel like the parents are fucking idiots. And it didn't, for me, it made a little bit more sense at that point when the intuition was kicking in. I'm glad you used that word for Claire, because even the way she expressed it I thought was really well written, because it was this amorphous thing. It was a feeling. It wasn't something she could like really put to logic. She's just like, I just noticed that everything weird has been kind of like happening since she came around. He's like, are you saying that she's directly responsible? Like her husband's applying logic to her. And she's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't really understand. I think we could use some time away from her. I don't really know why. And I'm like, this is good, because everything up until that point, I've been applying logic to. And this is the thing. Rebecca De Mornay, Peyton even offered a reference, like at their first meeting, at the end of at what was going to be the conclusion of their first meeting, and I was just kind of like spending the rest of the movie wondering, did they ever check that reference? Did they ever like what happened, or did they just invite this sweet, pretty woman they just met? Because that was another thing. Claire invites her in, takes her up to meet the baby before she's got the job. I understand you need to do that to kind of gauge it and everything like that, but there's no background check, there's no point of reference, there's no like really getting to know her, and then you leave her alone with the baby.
The conversation when they met at the school bus was she says, what agency sent you? Because she's like, oh, sorry, like, because she thought that she missed an appointment, and she's like, no, I didn't have an appointment, I just sort of heard through like other nannies on the playground. And like, like, I think that a rational mother would be like, oh, like nannies to like who sort of thing, and like, find out like which one of my friends, what was the situation, and then just like kind of like try to understand who she worked for before, because that would have been the reference. And you know what, I'm sure that Peyton, I mean, actually, maybe I'm not. Like, did she actually have a reference lined up, or was that sort of just like a gamble on her part? Like, I'm just going to say I have a reference and hopefully she doesn't check, because, I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, Peyton seems like she's someone who's so meticulous with her scheming and manipulation that she would have something just in case. So I can't see a scenario where that wouldn't work, but that does more so bespeak to how foolish Claire is, because it's just like, I'm like in awe of how like everything kind of lines up. And I mean, just for Peyton and like everything that she does, because there's a certain element to it that it does feel like it's a lot of like luck and coincidence, and she sort of just, things line up and she just kind of goes with it. But like, it always feels like one thing leads to another with her. Like when she first is just like saying to Emma, like, it's like, we've got a secret society or whatever, and then and a secret club, and then there's like Ernie Hudson, like Solomon sees her through the window, and she's just like, threatens him, and then and then sort of like, and then just like, oh, how am I gonna get rid of him? So she just like, she knows that she has this rapport with Emma, where there's like this secret thing, and then she's uses that verbiage when she's talking to Claire, just being like, I don't know, I just feel like maybe has some secrets or something or whatever. So then the Claire goes and talks to Emma and just like brings up this secret, like she thinks that she's talking about Solomon. Emma thinks that her mom's talking about Peyton, and it's
the playground.
So it's like she's really industrious with just like the way that she's able to kind of manage all of her lies throughout. Like it's fun to watch, and it's just like what makes her such a like a unique and competent villain. Like I wish that like more of the we'll just say, the more current Ghostface killers were like Peyton.
I also, but I do have to say, like, I think she chose her victim, the family who she chose to victimize. She chose really, really well, or was just really, really lucky, or both, because it's kind of dependent on the fact, like, her success is dependent on the fact that, like, there will be no communication that is blunt and that is like cards on the table between the members of this family, because I understand, as sketchy as a situation as it is, when you suspect, especially when it's your child that you suspect is being abused in that way, especially, and that was another thing that I started screaming at the screen when they were having that conversation, when Peyton was having that conversation with Claire to plant the seeds, as it were, because I was like, you know that this is going to be a trigger for her, because she's been manipulated sexually by somebody else, by a man who was in a position of power over her. So if she even suspects her daughter is, to kind of play that card, because you know that she may not behave in the most rational manner and not make the best decision, at least initially. That I understood. I thought that was actually pretty well handled by Peyton. She's a horrible person, but it was well handled. The thing that pissed me off, and because you touched on it, was the inattention to the effect of the alleged abuse on the child, because here they assume it happened, but then they never take her to therapy. There's no police report. There's no, it's like, I don't know if it's like a small town mentality.
We're no longer using your services.
Yeah, and that was terrible too.
Yeah, like there was no charges pressed against the Better Day Society or anything. Like it was just sort of like it was almost like there was like the husband was like remorseful, because he was just standing there like saying good, like, not, they didn't really say goodbye, but he was sort of like just shepherding him away and just being like,
he gave him the
bike.
They
let him keep the bike and all this stuff. So it was just like, there was like, it was almost like, well, he did this horrible thing, but he's like not right in the head. So I guess it's like, you know, it's not okay, but we're also like making excuses for it. So yeah, the parents are frustrating idiots, and and I think
because also Claire, they both just keep like talking around it with the daughter. That's the thing; it never gets directly addressed. So it's just kind of this unspoken secret, which I think is a good like don't do this, you know, kind of banner for a movie like this, which is like, well, this is what you don't do as a parent, you know. Like I mean, and I'm not judging I don't have a kid, but I'm just saying, if you suspect something major like that has happened to your child, like you might want to talk about it, like you might, or at least put your child in therapy, or take any of the things that we're saying these parents did not do. So it is expressly on the table. This is what happened. Now we have to deal with it, instead of it being this big secret that we're just all trying to like walk on, you know, eggshells around each other. I think that's bullshit.
I was gonna say, like, there were 4 other women who came forward after Claire, and for whatever reason, like, Peyton chose to target Claire and her family, and that's probably because, like, you know, on the news report, like, her name was the only one that was mentioned, which I was wondering too, like, are they allowed to say the name of the victim? Like, isn't there some sort of like anonymity to that? But like, that point aside, I just wonder if there was like a scenario where Peyton was like looked at all 5 families and was just like
that would have been
was just like, you know what? Like, let me pick the one whose parents are going to be like the easiest targets, and that just happened to be Claire and Michael. And they're just like, yeah, I can handle them. Yeah. Because I mean, they all would have been like new mothers, so it's just like she could have had her pick of any of them.
I mean, if she didn't die at the end, that could have been the sequel. She escapes through a window, or
oh my god!
Because that was another. Okay, can I tell you that was another thing? Like, by the time we got to the scene where she was like full on like, you know, twirling her proverbial mustache around her finger, Peyton was, you know, by going like, I don't even remember what the lines were, but basically saying like, I'm better than you, your kids like me better than you, I'm a better mate for your husband, and like whatever she's doing in her villainy. And then she just kind of like gets pushed out the window, and she's laying there, and all I thought, I couldn't help myself, but I'm speaking as Claire watching the movie, just kind of like, okay, Solomon, hold the baby. I trust you. you stick with Solomon, Emma, because we trust him. Mommy was wrong, but you know what? Mommy's gonna go downstairs real quick, and she's gonna finish her off. She looks dead, but we can't be too careful. I'm just gonna just put a few more jabs in this fucker because she ain't coming back for a sequel.
I mean, you didn't want to have her do a Dr. Loomis and just walk over to the window and then like
exactly
Peyton has like lifted herself off of the fence posts that have impaled her and just like scampered away. There's just an imprint. There's just an imprint of like on the grass of a body that was there.
100%. But another moment that I would have lived for. I was waiting, hoping that this would happen. It's after, and we'll talk more about Marlene because I adore her. But Marlene's end. We'll begin with the end when she goes into the greenhouse and it was rigged. Apparently for Claire, but she walks in. She's fine with her taking it anyway, and everything like that. And my mom and I are coaching Marlene, going like, when she walks in the house with her, we're just like, don't say too much, don't let her know, because she might try and off you. And she goes into the greenhouse and she turns around and all the glass shards fall down on her and everything, and she's just kind of quiet. And there's what was Peyton eating?
A green apple.
That's right. Yeah. She was cutting up like Kevin Costner, Prince of Thieves style, slices of apple into her mouth.
Well,
and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what a paring knife is for.
They eat apples.
Yeah.
In movies. Yeah. No, they do.
But she, so she goes out and everything like that to check the aftermath. And I just remember watching Peyton walk up to the greenhouse, and all I wanted with all of my spirit, heart, and soul was for Marlene to rise up, just glass encrusted all over her body, and just lunge at Peyton and just have shards like in her hands and just cut that bitch up with her hand. It's great. Like Bride of Chucky style, and just be like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Like, I wanted it so bad. And the fact that she just laid there and that's where her life ended. It really
that would have
me.
been a good, not necessarily, because we're still not at the end of the movie here, that there would have been a little bit more tension of just like, is Marlene dead? And Marlene kind of gets up, and there might have been like more of a struggle. Like, I wanted like there to be like just a point of view in this movie, or at least like an audience point of view, where we're actually wanting Peyton to get away with this sort of thing. And just like, how hard would it be? Like, we have to, like, Marlene's still alive, and it just like, like very Norman Bates, like, I got to clean up the motel room sort of thing, or just to kind of get a little bit more of that. Because instead we're just sort of like, we then just sort of segue to the emptying of the inhalers, which I forgot about that, because I just assumed that it was like she was gonna call the police and just be like, oh my gosh, there's this horrible accident. But like, she did it really like, and that's what's just so great about Peyton, because it was like a situation where that was rigged for Claire, and then it was just like, oh, I guess you'll do. Then rather than do like call the police or just be sensible, it's just like, I'm gonna empty all the inhalers and take the baby for a walk, so then I can just use that as my alibi and come home and then be like, oh my gosh, like, I live here, what's going on? Which is exactly what she did. So she can kind of like stick it to Claire, all that. Like, it's just like, because she wanted to kill Claire in this situation, but she still found a way to use it to make it even worse for her. Because it already would have been bad if Claire came home and like the police were already there and like this happened, but like doing it this way, it's like she still got to take her down a notch.
Yeah, I did for a couple seconds there, because they let a lot of time pass while Claire was going after one inhaler after the other, and then she remembered she had one in her purse, and she starts to make her way, and then she just drops onto the floor. I was like, oh my God, she Shelby'd. I was thinking about Steel Magnolias, Julie Roberts just Shelbying, just falling while she's trying to like get the phone and call a doctor. Anyway, but I'm just like, oh no. And I'm just watching the camera just like loom on her face as she's like breathing, and it's getting slower and more wheezy and everything like that. And for a second I was like, oh my God, does Peyton win? is that what's going to happen in this movie? Because I literally did, at that point, I did not have any idea.
And in that moment, because it's just like you mentioned earlier with like the proposal that they had to like FedEx, because in that moment we're not in the FedEx store with Claire. We're just sort of seeing it from Peyton's POV. So we're like we're there to just sort of experience like her point of view with all of that. Like we're empathizing with her in that moment where it's just like here we're not with Peyton. Peyton's out of the picture with the baby, and we're like having to live through this like horrible thing with Claire. So it just like that's where it is. Like there's just sort of like as we get to like the end of the movie where they're shifting away from Peyton and making her more of that very like two-dimensional mustache twirling villain, where it would have been interesting if there was a situation maybe that like Peyton was watching it, or there was a thing that like she was more involved, that we were still seeing it from her perspective while Claire was like struggling to find all that. But I mean, of course, then she runs the risk of like getting caught if like, you know, Claire pulls through and it's just been like, Peyton was there the whole time. She didn't help me. So, I mean, I hope that like, you know, in this remake, there's a little bit more craftsmanship put into like whose point of view are we going to be telling through this story. And I really hope like for a more interesting one that it is Peyton, but if it is Claire, if it is Mary Elizabeth Winstead that we're seeing the movie through, like just like let's be consistent. Let's just show her story here.
Well, I mean, that's one thing, and this was like kind of inescapable of the time, like when you were making a thriller. Again, it was like a high-octane, wild ride. I had a really, really good time with it. Is it the greatest screenplay ever written? No, but it definitely made me want to see. I looked at the screenwriter, Amanda Silver, who I haven't heard of before, or like not in a way that resonated with me. But I looked her up, and I saw that she immediately after this, like the next feature that she wrote was, used the term eye for an eye. There is a thriller with Sally Field called Eye for an Eye, where her daughter is, I believe, assaulted and killed, and the killer goes off. So in order to seek justice, vigilante style, Sally Field grabs a gun and chases him down. And she wrote this. She also wrote The Relic, which my sister saw and did not like. I've never seen it. She wrote the first Planet of the Apes, this new cycle of like Planet of the Apes movies we got. She wrote Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I like that one. And she was credited with the story. She was one of 4 writers for Jurassic World. And she also wrote, I haven't seen Avatar 2, but apparently she wrote that. And she wrote the Mulan, the live action Mulan, which I did see and I didn't really care for, but I don't really blame her for that.
I did notice that like the female name for the writer at the beginning, and it made me wonder, because I like, you know, I'd never had paid attention to that before, but just like on rewatching, just like, okay, how much of that is sort of like played into just sort of like the female agency of the movie. And I don't think this is ever like a measure of that, because there's been a lot of movies that have been written by men, like, you know, for instance, like we talked about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which is infamously or famously written by movie critic Roger Ebert, and that movie is just full of empowered female characters who have complete control over everything. Like they have all the agency, while the men are kind of relegated to the side to just sort of be props to be used by the women. And so I don't think that there's really a correlation between like whether that's written by men or women, but that is definitely an attribute of this movie where the female characters have all of the agency. So like, or at least, you know, mostly Peyton and Marlene, but then more so towards the end, Claire, as she sort of regains that. But like for the most part, you know, it's not really Claire. But like, you know, if you look at Solomon or Michael, I can't even think of any other male characters in this movie, but they're very meek. They're just sort of there. They're not particularly well adept at handling the situation or smart or knowing how to deal with it. So it's interesting. Like, it's just like, you know, like the 90s were like really the introduction of this. I mean, other than when you think of Sigourney Weaver and Alien, where you were really starting to see this uprising of female characters who are really driving the plot of all these movies, and especially these thrillers and everything. So that's why, now that I think of it, like, as it's been a while since I've seen Fatal Attraction, but I know so much of that is Michael Douglas focused, like with his characters. So I wonder how like viewing it against this one would be, because I mean, I always think that like female characters are just like so much more interesting than their male counterparts. There's just something about like especially like women misbehaving that I just find is just like it's such an interesting genre, we'll say. Sure. That yeah. And so like even like when you have like a character like Marlene, who's not necessarily like, she's, if anything, she's more of like an anti-hero here, because she's clearly, there's some sort of like animosity, like she's at odds with Claire, just based on the nature of their history, or like Michael having been involved with her in the first place. Like, they're kind of frenemies. Like, I get a vibe that Claire and Marlene are frenemies. So it's just interesting to see like where Marlene takes her power, because it's almost like she has this like protective nature over this character, but it's still like done in a very like aggressive and assertive way. Like, especially when we see her in her world, where she's like this like boss bitch, real estate agent. Like, she's clearly the head of this company, or she has a bigger office than anyone, and we're to the point where she can speak to her employees or her coworkers the way that she does, which I think is hilarious. But she just sort of like, she's not in this movie a lot, but every time that Julianne Moore is on screen, like, she makes such a big impression. So it's no surprise to me that she went on to be Julianne Moore, Oscar winner Julianne Moore. But it's funny that like she doesn't really like it takes no time. Like the moment that she first starts to see something's off, she knows immediately what it is, and she figures it out right away. And then of course that's her undoing. But it takes.
She has the titular line. Wait, I got it. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And I'm like, I love
that'll
you.
be the name of the sequel, The Hand That Rules the World.
If she survives in the remake, 100%. But I do say, like, the only thing that I kind of like take a different I have a different take on in terms of their relationship. I didn't get necessarily a frenemy so much as like a not really well lived in kind of friendship. I got the sense that Claire and Marlene knew each other, trusted each other, liked each other. Everything was on the table. It was known that everything was over, that her husband is devoted to her, but that Marlene is always going to have like a different dynamic with him, just on the basis of the fact that like she met him first, she knew him younger, he only smokes with her. Like, that was the big clue for me, that like, oh, you're a bad influence. I didn't get so much a frenemy vibe as it's just like a not through and through friendship, like the kind of friend you can be told something bad about, and a part of you will either want to believe it or will believe it or be susceptible to believing it or whatever it is, which it is. But I thought that was just Peyton exploiting that weakness there in Claire, that insecurity, which is what she does. Like the whole thing. That's why I was wondering, like, what's the end game in reality? Because really the end game or the game that she was playing was, let me make this woman as insecure as possible. Let me strip away the securities I see her having and look for little just like weaknesses in the armor, and I'll go for those. That's why she's so strategic, and that's why I agree with you. She's a really, really good villain. But then one of the things that I got at the strongest sense of their friendship, because it's not really even like focused on or really talked about. I mean, like, actually Marlene is kind of trashed after she dies. Like, I was wondering after she died and after they saved Claire, I was like, so Marlene doesn't get a funeral? What's going on? Why are we behaving? It's one of those, again, one of these like thriller tropes where it's like, we only get a funeral scene if we need some kind of significant exchange between people looming over the casket. And apparently we didn't need that for that movie, so Marlene gets no funeral, or the family doesn't go to it. But I thought that was kind of ridiculous. But it would have brought those two characters like home for me again. But the thing is, when she discovers the lighter, Claire discovers the lighter in his in the laundry and everything like that, and decides to go in, and everything about the two of them, again, totally innocent. They're planning a surprise party for her,
which
shows
of course
up and
Peyton,
just like
was the initiator on, but don't tell her it was my idea. I think I get the sense that she's the kind of woman who likes to be in control of
who's
things.
Really. And again, just like planting these like nuggets of just kind of like, well, you know how women are, right? Like, I'm going to play on her husband's weaknesses and his assumptions about like, well, I guess some women don't have to be left in the dark about something. Because that's, and we'll talk about him in a second. But the thing that got me the most was like, okay, so she goes into that kitchen, she starts screaming, well, I know you've been fucking Marlene, or whatever she says. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. There are people in there. And he doesn't even gesture. He just says there are people in there. So I'm like, oh, does she know that you mean in the other room? But she goes over and she sees all the people. And everybody's sitting there all awkward. And some people kind of meekly go, surprise.
Oh, I love
which
it.
Is funny.
It's so
but
good.
it was so good. But the thing that kept it from being completely scintillating and made it kind of like actually even jump higher was the way Julianne Moore stood apart from the rest of the crowd, just kind of standing there with her arms crossed. Mm-hmm. And just the expression on her face, that was so much more compelling to me than the little joke that followed, because I was watching her completely dejected, completely mistrusted, and completely like, wow, so that's what you think of me, and that's what you think of our friendship, my friendship with your husband, my friendship with you, and I just immediately thought like, oh my God, you hurt her. You wounded your friend for no reason. And you let this thing kind of like invade your house and like make you a crazy person when all they wanted to do was create a nice afternoon for you. And I thought it was scintillating on a whole other level. I was just kind of like, these are now human beings, and I am like this gossipy bitch, like with my back to the wall, going, oh girl, that was not a good look, you know, but involved. And the thing was, I loved that. This is one of the things that made me love Marlene and actually kind of like infuse like, okay, but there's something worth winning back with their friendship. Was she knew somehow, again, intuitively, like something's wrong with that bitch. It all started, I said it, I'm the one who identified, you bring another woman into your house and put her in a position of power, she's going to exploit it, and look what I bet she's the one. And what does she do? She sits at the fucking microfiche like they all do in these thrillers when they want to uncover the dark history. And I laughed out loud when the thing that kind of gave it away, when she was looking at all the real estate and everything, was the fucking wind chimes that she commented on. Well, she was kind of like, what is that annoying noise? Is the first question she asks when she gets out of the car.
The funny thing is that, like, Claire looks at the same listing, the same picture, and doesn't notice the winch. Like, that's the first thing Marlene, she takes out the magnifying glass, and it's just like, in like full like judgment, like, oh, I've seen those before. And this is kind of like another complaint where I feel like things were just like rushed a little too much, because I already talked about not getting the connection of just like, where was the point where Claire started to distrust Peyton, other than just like this women's intuition that just sort of like materialized all of a sudden, because all it took was for Claire to, like, she found the message that was left by the guy at the greenhouse place, whatever. Right. Where you get your seeds and your soil and whatever.
Get your seedlings.
She has it in her pocket. She looks at it and then goes to Marlene's office and just being like, well, what was going on? What was the big emergency? And like, well, I don't know. She was just, I gave her these listings and then like, it just seemed too easy. And then she looked at it and she didn't see the wind chimes, but she went down there and I guess for some reason gave it was very unclear because she sort of walked up and like the real estate agent was sort of like looking at her like, oh, are you this person? And like gave a completely different name. And she's just like, yeah, that's me. So I wasn't sure if like she had just announced, like just saw an opportunity and like, yeah, that's me. Show me the house. Or if she called ahead of the time and like used an alias that.
Oh, I thought she just lied.
She
was just like, yeah, that's me. Take me in.
I wasn't sure. But it was just like, and I liked this being like the thing that like, because it would have, you know, like we saw that there was still furniture there. Like it would have been stupid if like there was a photograph or whatever. So I liked that it was like the wallpaper, the turtles.
The turtle nursery.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was.
And the breast pump too. I like that.
That like connected it, but it still felt like too easy. Like I would have appreciated if like all of everything that Marlene did was like all for naught. It's like she came so close, and then they kind of like pulled out a different conceit later on as to like why does Claire stop trusting Peyton, and what is the thing that gets her to that house to see the wallpaper in the first place. So it felt too easy, and it felt like at that point in the movie they're just like, let's wrap it up. I mean, I'm not like, this movie's paced well, like I think that the time is perfectly, it doesn't feel like it's too long, but I think that they could have made better use of just like how everything was tied together, so it didn't feel like everything was just like quickly rushed at the last minute.
Okay. I mean, I do have to admit, like, while I laughed at the wind chimes, when she saw the turtles, I gay gasped.
Yeah.
And then when she saw the breast pump, I clapped my hands. I was like, yes, bitch! So then when we finally got to the aforementioned climactic punch that you talked about, I was living because I kept chanting, kill her, kill her.
Well, what was great about that moment is because like she comes in and she first goes to her husband and she's just like, I got to tell you something. And then she like looks over, sees her, and it's just like, this can wait.
Yeah.
It's like, this is, also, let me, I need to tell you something, but I'm going to give you a visual demonstration of what I have to tell you.
Yeah. I do have to say, while I would never grant Michael, the husband, dimension per se, like he is largely, just to bring it back to like you were talking about, like women-helmed projects and women kind of like led projects, but women are, you know, predominant on the screen and everything like that. One thing that I did feel like kind of like the hand of a woman writer, I think, was just the mindfulness. While he really was a side character, the husband, Michael, but I like the fact that like there was enough attention paid to him to not make him just like a tropey husband that we would see in a lot of other thrillers. Like I remember being worried when Claire first disclosed to him about like her experience at the gynecologist. I was worried that he was going to start doubting her or even start questioning her. And instead he just got as upset as I was and started telling her, you've got to tell someone, because if you don't, this could happen to someone else. Because my mom and I actually, in that moment when he said this could happen to someone else, we both said out loud, it already has.
Yeah. No, like he was encouraging of her. Like it wasn't like, you know, a situation, because we've talked about it a lot before, where it's just like, well, you're crazy or whatever. But I feel like there was a little bit of that throughout, like not enough that it sort of like pushed things over the edge at any point. I think that like the biggest mistake that he made, if there was anything, and I completely forgot, because he was sort of like a blank slate for me in terms of like revisiting the movie, because I just assumed I had the same sense he's just going to be the typical husband in these movies, and he wasn't, because I for whatever reason recalled that there was some sort of affair or something, or that he did, you know, kiss her, like there was a thing. So I was surprised to see that he did it, like he just sort of like rebuffed her and all that. But like, if there is something, it's just like, why did he not tell Claire after that? Just like, I think we need to get rid of Peyton because this happened.
Because they don't talk.
I mean, I guess no, they don't. I mean, I guess if there was an argument to be made, which I think is just the stupidest excuse ever. It's just like, well, I didn't want to upset her. It's like she's just so fragile right now with the assault and then Marlene's death and then being in the hospital, like, finding out and Solomon and finding out that Marlene made a pass at me. I mean, it would just be way too much for the poor woman to take, So they didn't. Yeah,
I also.
But that's like the one area where it's just like it felt like they just like completely drained him of anything. It's just like he's just not gonna say anything about this, and it didn't seem to like. It wasn't even reflective, like, because in that scene, remember, they're like setting up for dinner and the conversation is like they still seem to be like everything's fine between them, and he's like completely like just repressed this memory of her making a pass at him, and they're just like, I wonder where Claire is, like it's getting late, and not like there's not any sort of awkwardness between them. So I felt like that was an area of the movie that seemed a little haphazard.
And all that takes is like, even if you don't want to rewrite the scene, just some attention from the director to just kind of say, maybe don't be quite so comfortable in the next take, But like, you're still walking on eggshells around each other, like, but who knows? Because also that's another thing I did appreciate the fact that like after the punch was thrown, I got worried again for a split second, because I've seen this happen in many movies like this too, particularly, Lifetime-esque movies, where someone like Claire moves into a room, does exactly what I want her to do because she sees the truth, punches out her oppressor. I'm yelling yay, but then everybody in the room turns against Claire because she's the one who seems like she's out of her mind. Like, why did you punch her? Why would you do something like that? And I thought, like, oh, please don't, because she had a moment to tell him exactly what was going on, and the fact that she threw the punch first, I thought, no, you should have told him, or tell him as you're punching her, like, say he's trying to steal our family, but boom, like, he's Dr. Mott's widow, boom, but I like the fact that like she punched her and then explained herself, and he just kind of stood there and just kind of took it in, and then immediately once he realized. When she told me, he was like, what? And then basically stood shoulder to shoulder with her and joined her and like, okay, you're out. Get out of here. And I was like, okay, good. I can take this. And I also like that he was taken out, that he was like, essentially, I think he was responsible for Peyton's most Michael Myers-esque, like, moment in the movie when he's going down the stairs to seek out like her little
that was good
radio,
tension, her
alarm clock, playing more Gilbert and Sullivan, and then goes back up, and then as he's starting to creep up the stairs, out she pops. My mom and I both screamed. Well, it's just her with I think the shovel.
Yeah,
she just
no, it was because it was when like he
gets taken out with
the
his
music
legs.
Was playing, and then he went and he like shut it off. Because I thought that was a thing, like, when you can set an alarm and like the music will come on rather than a beep beep beep, but he shut it off, and then the fucking alarm went off, and that startled me a little bit. Then you're just waiting, like, when is she gonna pop out? So I mean, I think that's the thing. It's just like they sacrificed maybe more depth of character for Peyton as like what was bringing her back there in favor of like some suspense. And I guess like, okay, we can justify it because I think that it was good suspense.
I do too. I was rooting for Emma too. When Emma was,
You're not my mommy.
I loved that moment. I was cheering. I was like, okay, this is great, because all the things that I was worried about, that it seems like Peyton was trying to build herself up for, it's all failing. And that's what I want at the end of the movie. I want her to not just expire. I want her to fail. And I want the little girl to know her mommy is her mommy, her brother is her brother, she's being a good sister, she's hiding him. Then she was smart with the baby monitor, the fact that I thought she was just going to be sitting in that little closet waiting with him, but she knew, oh, baby's going to cry eventually, so I'll put the baby monitor, I'll take the other one with us, so then she'll chase that, and then she'll know and everything. I mean, everything, I was so, and then the fact that, okay, Solomon was watching them the whole time, and that I was so happy that he got to be in that attic and protect the little baby and redeem himself. And not that he needed redemption, but at least like in the eyes, like that was the thing. It wasn't that he needed redemption. It was the fact that like this, broke my heart. He still he still saw them as his family. That's what moved me. I was like, right on, Solomon. Like, you got accused of like one of the worst things a person can be accused of, especially if they have not done it. And you didn't turn on the family. Like, no one would have blamed you, but you love simply, and you don't want them to be hurt. You saw this force move into their space, and you knew that it was going to make everyone unhappy. So you kept watch, and you get to be the hero of the movie. Here you were the scariest thing in the world to them in the beginning of the movie, and then at the end, you're their savior.
His fence was also her undoing.
Yeah, that was cool. I did know that.
But I thought it was funny that like the whole thing is just like, what kind of fence do you want? Like one to like keep people out or keep people in, and they're just like, well, both. And then it just turns out to be this little like dinky white picket fence anyway.
Yeah. Although one thing I do have to say I also appreciated really early on that told me like, okay, I think I like these people was after the 6 months were up, he was still there working, and I didn't realize he was working on the trim right away. I thought he was still working on the fence, and I'm like, 6 months later, he ain't done with that fence.
No, they just liked having him around, or maybe they just sorry for him or whatever the situation.
Well, because this is the thing. I love that like he was working on the trim of the house, and Emma even asks her daddy like, what are we going to do when he's done with the trim of the house? Like, is he not going to come around anymore? And he's like, well, we'll just have to find something else for him to work on. I was like, I like this. Mm-hmm. I like this family. I like the fact that, they made a mistake when they first met him, and now,
well, I liked his sort of like my favorite moment of his is when he was like just coming in and he's like, I am approaching the door. I am now entering the door. And like it's almost like he just like had a good sense of humor about it.
Yeah, I thought so too. It was really good. Only other thing I did that was driving me nuts, but I guess it was in a good way because I wasn't disinterested with the climax. I kept wondering after they excused Peyton from the house the first time, when she, after the punch, when she's like, I'm gonna get my baby blood. And then they made the decision to go up and like, she put Emma to bed and he went looking to inspect the alarm and everything like that. And I was just kind of like, has anyone checked the baby? Who's not checking on Joe? And I kept clapping my hands, screaming, check the baby! She's after the baby! And I think
that they put Emma to bed because they were packing to get out of there.
Oh, that's right. In her bedroom.
I think that the baby was in the room with Emma and Claire.
Is that what happened?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I was just nervous because usually you hear or I didn't see the baby, so I was just like, what's going on? Yeah. So anyway, but I'm really, really glad I saw it. The performances across the board. I don't know what else I've seen Annabella Shora in. I've known the name for a long time. I know that she was in What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, that movie about the afterlife where he goes to kind of like, I think she's like in the afterlife, but she's going to burn in hell. So he goes to save her soul or something. And so she can live and he'll burn in hell for her. I don't even remember.
Well, her top four, or I guess top two, known for Hand That Rocks the Cradle and Jungle Fever.
Oh, I never saw Jungle Fever. Okay.
Yeah, like she's just one of those, like I've seen her in things, but it's just like, small roles or just like television episodes of things here and there. Like I think she does a lot of TV.
I thought she did a really good job with this, though. Like
she was on she was on The Sopranos.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. I haven't seen it, but I remember hearing her associated with that.
I'm wanting to do a rewatch at some point here.
Oh.
But yeah, I think that she was just one of those faces that was just like, especially in the 90s, was just like in
always around
a lot of things, and I like for the remake, just like the casting of just like Mary Elizabeth Winstead in that role, because it's just like I can see it, and I can see Maika Monroe, and now I'm wondering like who's gonna be the redhead that plays Julianne Moore's character.
Maybe it'll be like her gay best friend or something. Who knows? There's like a question. Maybe her husband is, like fluid sexually and like she's threatened by that.
I hope not. Just
You got to think like a remake. But no, I do have to say on the page, it would probably seem like a thankless role, the role of Claire. But I thought Annabella did a really, really good job. I thought everybody pretty much did a really, really solid job at what they were tasked with.
Yeah, and it's a small cast. Like there's not an abundance of people. Like if there's other characters, they're just sort of like background extras at the party, like surprise, or,
right?
You know, like the
like
guy
Marty,
the seedlings,
spend a little time with Marty. Yeah, a little time with Marty. Marlene, is it
Marlene's
husband?
And their last name was Craven. Did you notice that?
I like that. I'm Marlene Craven. This is Marlene Craven on the phone. I'm just like, oh, I love
you know my husband, Wes. Yeah.
Yeah. My father, Wes. Do I make Wes French? Is that my Wes Craven voice? I don't even remember anymore. Do I go,
no, you don't do that.
Okay, who's Wes Craven then? How do I do his voice?
I thought it was funny that the alias that Mrs. Motts, because we never find out her real first name. We just know Motts. But it's just like it's the last name is Flanders, so I thought it would have been funny if instead of the Bartels it was the Simpsons.
And the thing that probably I loved to find microcosms in movies, like a moment or a shot that kind of like encompasses the entire thing. And for me, the epitomal moment was very early on when I felt like the movie showed me exactly what it was. It was when Rebecca De Mornay is writhing on the operating table and she's screaming like my baby, or whatever, and anything like that. And it's all the heights of melodrama coupled with like a very, very connected, visceral performance, but also the close-ups revealed the falseness and the fullness of her eyelashes. And I was like, work. Okay, I'm in. Sign me up. Yeah. I want
Well,
two
I
of
mean,
these.
she was just at the lawyer's office. Like she had to get all done up for that. So I think that it was just like they just took her right to the hospital and she
Yeah, but they were still intact, like they weren't falling off or anything like that. And I was just kind of like, that's the movie I want to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we can probably, unless there's anything else you wanted to say.
I think we covered it.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get to the cherry picker.
It's not like we killed people. On purpose.
Okay, first order of business, we need a cherry on top, and I mean, I think that this is pretty obvious. But I mean, yeah, it's Rebecca De Mornay or Mrs. Motts, Peyton Flanders. Well, it's funny because I was just thinking, like, when we did single white female, I don't think that we ended up choosing the dog because I think we were just so annoyed by everyone.
We were looking at characters. Yeah. There's a blurred line now. I think before we were sticking more to characters, and now it's like, no, we can say actor or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's for the cherry on top. There never really is a rule about that. But I mean, like this is
we've had plural cherries on top before. Yeah,
right. Yeah, we've done that. But I just think like this is the like you already said it's the role of her career.
It's her movie.
It really is, and just like there's like a calmness to an intensity to her as well. Like it's just like in the performance that's just very intimidating, but like tranquil at the same time. It's just like this is a woman who's just like one gust of wind away from exploding. And she just plays it so perfectly. We didn't mention that we covered another movie that Rebecca De Mornay was in, which is one that I really liked, but you weren't so hot on, and that was Identity, where she played the actress who was being driven.
Too briefly.
But very memorable. I mean, that was a great cast in that movie, but no, she did a good job there. She did a good job in this. The other thing I remember her from, do you remember the American Pie movies?
Yeah.
So Jennifer Coolidge played Stifler's mom, who famously seduced Finch. And then I think it was one of the sequels. I think it was like American Reunion, whatever one they did like years later, where
American Wedding.
No, it wasn't Wedding because that was like early on. But they did.
Oh, okay.
I think it was the reunion, and it was sort of like Stifler's revenge because he ended up meeting Finch's mom and sleeping with her, and Finch's mom was played by Rebecca De Mornay. So she was like she was the the other MILF besides Jennifer Coolidge.
Wow, would she ever be? My God, the woman's gorgeous. Like I loved. Oh, that was another thing I loved, that like she's wearing her almost sheer little nightgown while she's like on all fours picking up. It looked like she was recovering ice. She had
and I was thinking like,
and she put it back.
Like, and he wasn't paying attention to that. It's just like floor ice.
No,
like you know that the fridge just remakes new ice. You know.
Yeah, right. But he was so Twitter-pated or just under her spell momentarily that he didn't even notice. I mean, and I guess neither did she.
And you know what? Like that's very fair to like her belief that he was talking about, or that that there was a chance for her, and that she misconstrued the words, because here he is just like like ogling her in her nightgown, and also the fact that they're setting up for dinner and there's no awkwardness or anything based on the previous night. So it's just like, for by all means, like she's probably reading into that and just being like, why am I not being thrown out? This guy clearly has a thing for me. So hopefully the remake will tidy things up there a little bit. But at first when they announced it, I was just like, oh God, a remake of this. But now, having watched the movie again, just like, I'm for that. Because it's just like, while I think that like this is a movie that is really well executed, I think that it could use a different perspective. It could use kind of like an update in time. I think that like the best remakes are movies that I think, especially for horror, are movies that, have a really good premise, but maybe not the best execution. But there's an argument to be made here that even though the execution was good, I think that there's a way that it could be better. I don't think that it will be, but, there's potential.
I mean, if it's done well and it's successful, it just means we'll get more movies like it. And
I love this subgenre, so I'm up for it.
And plus those actors, sign me up. My ticket's already bought.
It's bought.
It's bought. It's already brought.
So just because we mentioned this last week, but I'm gonna be out of town. So while you're listening to this, I'm already gone. So we're just sort of recording and stockpiling things. So we haven't really been able to pull the previous episode, which was opera. So what we're going to do is, we'll address all of the comments and the results at a later date when I do return after we've pulled the cherry pickers. So since we don't know the winner from that, we're just going to sort of alternate. So Edward, you had first go last time, so I'm going to take first go this time, and the next week you'll take first go. So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to this is like, I know it sounds pretty basic, but I'm going to go for Dr. Victor Mott, because his death is necessary. He is a prop for the movie to happen, and if he doesn't die, the movie doesn't happen. And that's my argument as to why it should be Victor Mott, aside from all the horrible things that he did.
Okay, and I'm going to say I don't think, because he died, he evaded consequences of his actions, so I don't think he deserved to die. I think he deserved to face his oppressors and face himself and have to go to prison.
Oppressors or accusers?
His accuser. Sorry, I'm so tired.
He was oppressed.
His perceived oppressors.
Perceived?
No, the people he oppressed. Yeah. To perceive the people he oppressed, and to go to prison and to maybe even be violated himself. Yeah. But not everybody deserves that, but I think he does. And then so I'm gonna pick Peyton, because this is the thing.
Well, that's against the rules.
I can't pick her.
No, you can't pick the cherry on top.
Haven't we done that before? I feel like we have. Okay, then I won't pick her. I don't know who to pick then.
How about the baby?
No, I don't want the baby to die.
What about the lawyer who is, at the beginning, like, it's like, you can stay in the house until the baby's born, but after that...
No. What did he do?
He caused her to miscarry.
No, he didn't. He's just the messenger. You can't hold him responsible for that. I'm looking at the list.
How about the schoolyard bully?
He deserved to die.
Come on.
I don't even think he deserved what he got. I'll find someone, but you threw me a curveball here. Okay. Okay, I got one.
Okay.
Mary Ann Owen is the actress who played Dr. Mott's nurse. Don't tell me she didn't know what was going on. So she should have reported his ass. She's the one who enabled him, who opened the door, who got the calls from the women and everything like that. She even mentioned, like, yo, by the way, you've got a call from this woman and you got another woman who's like waiting on you, and he's just kind of like, yeah, I'll get to them and everything. And I'm just kind of like, bitch, stay in the room. Like, no, you know what's going on. I suspect her. So she's complicit in his actions, and she should have known better. She should have done better. Like, come on, stand with your sisters. And so I'm going to kill her.
An interesting headcanon assumption.
My back is against the wall.
You could have picked something fun. Okay.
Like?
Like the schoolyard bully.
Go ahead, critique, but don't offer any suggestions.
I offered like
the
three.
School bully does not deserve to die.
I offered three suggestions.
No, the school bully did not deserve to even have like the come up.
Nobody deserves it, but that's just the nature of the episode.
Well, then he's not a viable option. See, you should have picked him. If you like him and think he should have died
I
so
just
much,
think
then
sometimes
go for
it's
it.
fun when I have the opportunity to back you into a corner to see where you go. But,
And look at you. You're having all the fun now. Good for you.
I feel like Peyton right now, I'm just like leaning in, just like watching you.
That's exactly
watching you not be able to
right
find
now.
the.
Here, I'm gonna give you my sweater. I'm gonna take off my sweater, and I'm gonna surrender it to you, because between the two of us, I'm the Claire.
Okay,
here you go.
I'm grabbing it. Would have been great for people watching if I had a sweater and I could. Just,
I'm not preppy sexy. I'm not preppy sexy. I'm just like.
Oh, and now you're taking the top button out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
go on.
Those are your options. You can choose the oppressive Dr. Victor Mott, or his nurse, because she was his little henchman the whole time.
I made my case. I don't need your help. They know who the options are. Go on.
Because there is no way possible that he was like trying to give her all this busy work so he could have more time with.
She knew.
Yeah.
Don't tell me she did not know.
Very brazen of this doctor to just like on a first time patient just like go ahead and do that. Like maybe,
no, yeah. It was gross.
Yeah.
It was not since. Whenever they go the wrong way with a gynecologist in a horror movie, it's always like it's done. I've only seen it, I think, impactfully done. Like the other reference I have in my head is Teeth, which was even more gruesome.
I remember that.
I was like, so gross, so gross. I was worried. Should I be showing this to my mother? And then the whole movie wasn't like that. It was like actually done in a way where I'm like, oh, okay, that's the first domino.
No, it was all done very tastefully. And they cut away before like anything overly provocative. But I'm just saying, like speaking to sort of like the Hallmark or Lifetime nature of the
Hallmark.
I confuse the two. Hallmark, Lifetime.
No, Hallmark doesn't make movies like this.
Sorry, Lifetime.
Tell me where there was a greeting card.
Look, I don't have the Hallmark. I lump them all together. There's no Hallmark horror?
I mean, every Hallmark movie that's made is essentially like a greeting card put in feature length. That's what it is. That's what you can expect.
Okay.
There are
Hallmark,
no.
yeah.
So will you just move it along? I have places to be.
Okay, diva. So those are your options. You got the doctor or the nurse. Vote your heart, vote your conscience. The poll is open on Patreon if you want to go over there. You don't have to be a subscriber. You do get a free vote if you want to throw an extra one over there. But while you're there, check it out. Maybe something will interest you and you want to support the podcast in a way. You can also vote on Patreon. Excuse me. You can also vote on Instagram. We are at the Cherry Picker Pod. I think I got that right. And poll runs every week. And if you are new to the podcast on YouTube, head over to the community section. Polls over there. Subscribe. And if you want to listen to us, the RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. If that is your preferred podcast consumption method. Edward, where can they find you on Soch?
Mostly on Instagram. Edward is truth, one word, traditional spelling, no spaces. How about you, Zack Cherry?
Awesome. You can find me on my main YouTube channel, Zack Space Cherry, and on Instagram, Retro Bitch Face, no spaces, and Twitter, Zack Cherry 8, Letterboxd, Zack Cherry. I believe that's all. What's going on next week?
Ghost ship.
Wow, you really are in a hurry.
Yes, I am.
Thank you for watching and listening, and we will be right back.